Okay, welcome everybody who's here for Tuesday night's wake up group at the Dallas Meditation Center. So Tuesday night's wake up is intended to be particularly supporting young adults in their 20s and 30s, and those people who want to be supportive of that peer group. So if you're here in the Zoom room with us, welcome. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, welcome also. And please know that you are always invited to join us live in the Zoom room by going through the either the Dallas Meditation Center Dallas Meditation Center Facebook page, or there's a Wake Up Facebook page as well, where the link gets posted. Not all facilitators use Zoom exclusively. I do because I like the way that it feels to have everyone in the room while we're together. But yeah, you're more than welcome to join us in the Zoom room. This is one of many groups that we have throughout the week. We have something almost every day of the week, including most weekdays at noon. We have a Zen-to-go, and then we have gatherings on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evening. And you can find information about that in the links underneath the YouTube video below. So thank you for coming. At this point in the gathering, we will do a brief check-in with the people who are here in the actual Zoom meeting. So I will pause the recording and we'll be right back with a guided meditation and a talk. So we'll be back in a moment. So at this point, we'll do our opening affirmation. If you're hearing it for the first time and it's unfamiliar, feel free to just listen to it as sound. If it resonates with you, let it in and go with it. If it doesn't resonate, no problem. Just let it float on by. We'll begin with 3 sounds of the bell to become present here in the present moment. So using the sound of the bell, returning to the present moment. May we and all beings be happy and free. May we and all beings transform our suffering. May we and all beings rejoice in all joys. May we and all beings be at peace. So now you can go ahead and find a posture that's comfortable. We're going to do our meditation together. You can be seated, you can be laying down, you can be standing. If you're laying down, the recommendation is to maintain the intention of remaining awake and alert. If having your eyes slightly open is supportive of that, you can do that. If you're sitting, again, stability and comfort are what we're going for. Allow the back to be upright. The back of the neck is in line with the spine. You might tuck the chin under slightly. You could also imagine a thread emerging from the top of your scalp, gently tugging upwards towards the ceiling, aligning your spine and your neck, your head. The weight of the chest is balanced over the spine so that there's not a pulling or a bending forward. Allow the shoulders to be back just a little, opening the chest. The hands can rest on the knees or the thighs, or perhaps one palm inside the other in the lap. And you could take a moment to rock forwards and backwards or side to side or in small circles, settling into a point of balance where the spine is aligned over the pelvis. And feeling the legs on the floor or the feet on the floor if you're in a chair. And now taking 2 or 3 deep intentional breaths, filling the lungs, exhaling any stale air that's in the lungs from shallow breathing. And taking a moment to make any last-minute adjustments to your posture. The goal is stability and comfort. We'll be sitting for 20 to 25 minutes. Now release any control over the breathing. And perhaps for a moment checking in with yourself. Why are you here? What is your intention in meditating today, in this moment? And how can that intention be brought alive as you practice? Now allowing any thoughts or imagery to dissolve. Returning to a simple awareness of the breathing and the sensations of the breathing throughout the body. Breathing in, aware of breathing in. Breathing out, aware of breathing out. Noticing that awareness of the breathing includes awareness of bodily sensations. The body and the breath are connected. Breathing in and breathing out. If the mind wanders to thoughts or memories, plans, worries, this is not a problem. Simply notice that there is thinking and return to the sensations of breathing. In a sense, the practice is all about how we return when we've wandered. And returning with an attitude of non-judgment and compassion. Noticing what it's like to be aware of the breath and the body and the mind without imposing any judgments about what you find. Allowing space for anything that is there. Releasing ideas of liking or disliking, and simply being with what is present without judgment. What happens within the field of experience when we release approval and disapproval of sensations or thoughts or even ideas about ourselves or other people or our situation? What's it like to meet all of it with a mind of non-judgment, of simple awareness? Breathing in, aware of breathing in. Breathing out, aware of breathing out. Releasing control, releasing any agenda other than simply being here with the breath. allowing the attention to rest on the sensations of breathing, releasing any control or constriction around the breathing. Noticing if the mind wants to race ahead of the breath or lag behind the breath. See if we can just rest with the river and the flow of the breath as it is. Can we stay with the transforming sensations of the breathing, releasing into the transformation of the breath? Without any effort other than placing the attention. Perhaps scanning the body or the mind for any areas of constriction or tension, and seeing if there are ways that you can intuitively make more room for an expanded sense of awareness throughout the field of the body. The idea isn't primarily to simply relax or become calm, although this can be of benefit. But the idea is to make space for broader, more inclusive awareness. During this last portion of our seated meditation, there's an invitation to contemplate non-judgment. So we're practicing non-judgmental awareness. Just consider from your own direct experience, what is non-judgmental awareness like? And consider what it might be like to hold ourselves in non-judgmental awareness. What would it be like to live without holding judgments about ourselves? Are there any particular judgments that might be useful to question and release about ourselves? And what is left in awareness when the judgment is no longer there? And now, similarly, contemplating what it might be like to release judgments about others. This could be a specific person or a group of people, or a situation. Contemplating what it might be like to release any judgments that might be clouding our ability to relate compassionately. And noticing when the judgment is released, what is left in awareness related to this person or these people, this situation. Imagining and perhaps even experiencing a mind free from judgments. And finally, releasing any imagery or thoughts, and returning again to the simple awareness of the breathing within the body. Arriving in the present moment. And bringing palms together, we'll bow to our practice and to each other. Thank you, everyone, for meditating together, for taking this time. We'll have a few minutes break, maybe 2 minutes or so, in case you want to get some water or go to the bathroom, anything like that. And after the short break, there will be a talk, and after the talk, we'll have our discussion. So, see you in a moment. Okay, so as I mentioned in the check-ins, which are not going to be on the YouTube video if you're watching after the fact, had a lot of brain fog the last couple of days. So rather than preparing a full talk for tonight, I thought I would spend some time sharing a little bit from a book that I really, really appreciate. It's not exactly a Dharma book, but I think it's very aligned with all of the topics that we share here. And it's a book that I highly recommend to anyone who wants to learn a bit more about communicating with compassion and with non-judgment. And I'm not sure if the camera is going to reverse this, but I'll show it to you anyways. Here's the book. You can see all of my notes and marks in it over the years. I think it probably reversed the image, but the book is called Nonviolent Communication, and the author is Marshall Rosenberg. You can find used copies of this book for next to nothing online. I'm sure there's quite a lot of them. So if you're unfamiliar with nonviolent communication, or NVC for short, it's a really powerful way of communicating that takes the elements of non-compassion out of our way of thinking and speaking. The book is incredibly inspiring, and the practice itself can be quite challenging because it requires a lot of mindfulness. I'll read you a little paragraph describing what NVC actually is, and I think you'll see pretty quickly how it relates to our practice here. So he writes, NVC guides us in reframing how we express ourselves and hear others. Instead of being habitual, automatic reactions, our words become conscious responses based firmly on an awareness of what we are perceiving, feeling, and wanting. We are led to express ourselves with honesty and clarity, while simultaneously paying others a respectful and empathic attention. In any exchange, we come to hear our own deeper needs and those of others. NVC trains us to observe carefully and to be able to specify behaviors and conditions that are affecting us. We learn to identify and clearly articulate what we are concretely wanting in a given situation. The form is simple yet powerfully transformative. So I think that, to me, has a lot of correlation with mindfulness or mindful awareness. It's almost identical in practice. It's being aware primarily of what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're wanting, basically the totality of our own experience. There's an attuning to it, an attention on it, and not only of our own experience, but then also an empathy or a compassion, a sensitivity to the same information from others. In this way, we can relate with ourselves and with each other through the reality of what's happening in the moment, rather than through too many fixed ideas about ourselves and about others. And those fixed ideas are what I'm going to refer to as judgments. So I'm going to read a couple of pages, so bear with me because it's going to be a bit of a longer reading, but I think it's really interesting and really useful. It's about a page and 3/4, talking about the theme of judgments and how judgment really gets in the way of communicating well, which means it gets in the way of us having satisfying results in our relationships with people, whether they're close to us or whether it's in a social setting, like a political or a broader national setting or world international setting. So I'm just going to read it and let it speak for itself, and then add a couple of comments afterwards, and then we'll have time, plenty of time, really, to discuss the theme in our discussion group. So I'll just read here. So he talks about different kinds of communication, and he says one is compassionate communication, which encourages a connection and a life to flow through our relationships, and what he calls life alienating communication. So life alienating communication contains aggression or defensiveness or agendas that aren't being communicated compassionately. So he writes, one kind of life alienating communication is the use of moralistic judgments that imply wrongness or badness on the part of people who don't act in harmony with our values. Such judgments are reflected in language such as, the problem with you is that you're too selfish. She's lazy. They're prejudiced. It's inappropriate. Blame, insult, put-downs, labels, criticism, comparisons, and diagnoses are all forms of judgments. I'm going to reread that sentence. Blame, insults, put-downs, labels, criticism, comparisons, and diagnoses are all forms of judgment. The Sufi poet Rumi once wrote, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Life alienating communication, however, traps us in a world of ideas about rightness and wrongness, a world of judgments. It is a language rich with words that classify and dichotomize people and their actions. When we speak this language, we judge others and their behavior while preoccupying ourselves with who's good, bad, normal, abnormal, responsible, irresponsible, smart, ignorant, etc. Long before I reached adulthood, I learned to communicate in an impersonal way that did not require me to reveal what was going on inside myself. And that's, to pause, that's really key. He's pointing out kind of the problematic ways of thinking and speaking, but there's lines in here that point to a different way of doing things, and this is one of them. So it's learning how to communicate in a way that reveals what's going on inside of ourselves. But in his case, long before I reached adulthood, I learned to communicate in an impersonal way that did not require me to reveal what was going on inside of myself. When I encountered people or behaviors I either didn't like or didn't understand, I would react in terms of their wrongness. If my teachers assigned a task I didn't want to do, they were mean or unreasonable. If someone pulled out in front of me in traffic, my reaction would be, you idiot. When we speak this language, we think and communicate in terms of what's wrong with others for behaving in certain ways, or occasionally what's wrong with ourselves for not understanding or responding as we would like. Our attention is focused on classifying, analyzing, and determining levels of wrongness rather than on what we and others need and are not getting. Thus, if my partner wants more affection than I'm giving her, she is needy and dependent. But if I want more affection than she's giving me, then she is aloof and insensitive. If my colleague is more concerned about details than I am, he is picky and compulsive. On the other hand, if I am more concerned about details than he is sloppy and disorganized. It is my belief that all such analyses of other human beings are tragic expressions of our own values and needs. They are tragic because when we express our values and needs in this form, we increase defensiveness and resistance to them among the very people whose behaviors are of concern to us. Or if they do agree to act in harmony with our values, because they concur with our analysis of their wrongness, they will likely do so out of fear, guilt, or shame. That's a lot of words in those two sentences. Basically, when people are complying out of judgments, even if they agree with our judgments, there's a degree of fear or shame or guilt going on. And he says, to continue just a short section more, we all pay dearly when people respond to our values and needs not out of a desire to give from the heart, but out of fear, guilt, or shame. Sooner or later, we will experience the consequences of diminished goodwill on the part of those who comply with our values out of a sense of either external or internal coercion. They too pay emotionally, for they are likely to feel resentment and a decreased self-esteem when they respond to us out of fear, guilt, or shame. Furthermore, each time others associate us in their minds with any of those feelings, we decrease the likelihood of their responding compassionately to our needs and values in the future. So the judgments are related to our values. We judge things that are either in alignment or out of alignment with what we value. He says we make moralistic judgments of people and behaviors that fail to support our value judgments. For example, violence is bad, people who kill others are evil. Had we been raised speaking a language that facilitated the expression of compassion, we would have learned to articulate our needs and values directly, rather than to insinuate wrongness when they have not been met. For example, instead of violence is bad, we might say instead, I am fearful of the use of violence to resolve conflicts. I value the resolution of human conflicts through other means. And he relates this style of communication to a generalized violence that we see at the micro level in the way that we communicate with each other, and at a macro level as far as the violence we see in the larger world. He says at the root of much, if not all violence, whether verbal, psychological, or physical, whether among family members, tribes, or nations, is a kind of thinking that attributes the cause of conflict to wrongness in one's adversaries, and a corresponding inability to think of oneself or others in terms of vulnerability, what one might be feeling, fearing, yearning for, missing, etc. So that's what I wanted to share with you out of that book, the topic of judgment and being aware of how we hold judgments or communicate judgment or use judgment in our relationships is something that's really ongoing. I don't know anyone who doesn't have some element of this to work with. I certainly do. I'm sharing this because whenever I share with you in our groups here, the topic is usually something that's really immediately relevant to my experience, which is why I'm dwelling on it and wanting to share it with you. So don't think that I'm free of this stuff, because I've got judgments, a bucket and a half, to work through. So what I see, to summarize, if you want like a real brief summary of how to understand judgments, I see it as kind of a constellation. I made a little note here called the constellation of judgment. And that constellation consists of thinking in terms of what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, what's worthy and unworthy. It's a very all or nothing. It's really black and white, and it's static. It's a static label. And as a result of something being good or bad or right or wrong or worthy or unworthy, the next step goes to another kind of a toxic pattern we have in our way of thinking and speaking, which is this idea of deserving, And in our culture, we've been ingrained with these ideas. So if we have these habits, I have these habits of thinking in this way, we've inherited them through culture, through various means. But that idea of deserving links to good, bad, right, wrong, worthy, unworthy, because based on what side of that dichotomy someone or something is sitting on, including ourselves, then they're worthy of reward or punishment. So you're being rewarded if you're on the good side, and you're being punished if you're on the bad side. The problem with that is that if we're doing something to avoid punishment. We're not doing it because our heart naturally aligns with it. We're not doing it out of like a natural outflowing of our a kind-heartedness or compassion or our deeper values. We're just trying not to get hurt. And that ultimately is going to backfire. What we often don't see is that praise and reward can be just as damaging as blame and punishment. So by praising or rewarding based on someone being on the side of good or being right or being worthy according to a judgment of them, it also manifests behavior in ourselves and others where we're trying to get the reward not because it feels good to do whatever it is that might be pleasant for another person or for ourselves, but in order to get that stamp, that label of I'm on the good side, I'm right, I'm worthy because I'm fulfilling someone's expectation of a certain kind of judgment. So whether it's reward or punishment, the system is just kind of broken when it comes to sustaining real connection in relationships on a micro scale or a macro scale. So here's the big problem. This is the issue. And I'm seeing there's someone's going to have to head out early. No problem. No worries. So yeah, the alternative. So now that we know what the issue is, what the problem is, the alternative comes back to our mindfulness, which is awareness. So as we opened the reading with being aware of what we're perceiving, what we're feeling, what we're wanting, being in the flow of that direct experience and communicating from there. So the clinch here is that requires vulnerability. So I think it's one of the ideas of the book, as well as something that I really resonate with, that you don't really have real relationship, real connection, real communication unless there's vulnerability. You can communicate about, technical things, like where do you, how do you attach the carburetor to the car, but you can't really have a human, deeper interaction with someone without being vulnerable. If you notice all of the judgments, they are invulnerable, because when you say something that is judgmental, you're saying something about something that's not yourself. It's that thing over there is good or bad, that person is good or bad. But it's not really talking about what you're feeling, what you're needing, what you're wanting. So being aware of that within ourselves is the first step. And then being curious about those same experiences in other people is the next step. If you want to work through a conflict or work through a conversation that seems to be kind of fraught with judgment in the middle of it, just drop the judging thoughts and start communicating, hey, what are you feeling and what are you needing? What are you wanting? Like, what are you afraid of? What are you hoping for? And start to really open the field of vulnerability and also share that from yourself. And that's the way through. It's awareness, which of course, as we practice, not just in today's meditation, but in our meditations in the past, almost every meditation I do, I guide with you here, includes the idea of non-judgmental awareness without imposing a judgment on what we experience. So that, combined with a compassionate intention, combined with deep listening, is the key to practicing in a non-judgmental way. And I really recommend reading the entire book. I really recommend getting a copy. Again, the book is called Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life, and the author is Marshall Rosenberg, and I will put that in the chat for folks who come to the discussion afterwards, and I'll also put it in the information below the YouTube video when that gets posted as well. So There was one more thing that I thought I was going to share, and if I can remember it, I will. And that is... Did it slip away? I think it might have slipped away. If it comes back later during the discussion, I'll share it. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy listening to reading from a book sometimes, because that's what happened. I just enjoy that book. I hope it was helpful for you. And yeah, now at this point, we're going to pause the recording so we can have a discussion in private in the Zoom room with the folks who are here live. And then we'll be back afterwards to do our closing. So for those of you watching on YouTube, thank you for your attention and for your contemplation of the theme. And I really hope that it was beneficial to you in some way. So thank you very much. Okay, so we're back from the discussion portion of the evening. I'd like to share with anyone who is not here live, but who's watching this video on YouTube. I just want to say for myself that the discussions that we have after the talk and meditation are really, really a wonderful part of our gatherings. So if you would like to join us for that, I think you would probably also really enjoy it. There's a depth, just a depth of experience and wisdom and sensitivity and just good stuff that comes from all of the people who actually show up live and contribute their own thoughts and perspectives and life experiences that just is so far beyond anything that I could give you in a 20-minute talk just from my own brain or my own singular experience. So big invitations to anyone who's been curious about joining to join our live group here at some point in the future. So to wrap up, a few announcements. DMC is 501c3. It's entirely nonprofit and entirely run on donations. So in particular, during this time of lockdown, it's really crucial that we continue to be able to maintain our center. We do have a physical space that we are paying rent for, and hopefully we'll be able to open that up again for us to practice in person together. But for now, we still do have that rent. So if you would like to include generosity within your practice, there's always a very wide opportunity to do so. If you're watching the video on YouTube, it's going to be down in the comments of the video. And yeah. So yeah, other than that, we're here almost every day of the week, as I mentioned at the beginning, and hope to see you soon. So we're going to close with our closing chant, just like our opening affirmations. If this is new to you, feel free to just listen. If you resonate with it, let it in. If you don't, no problem. It's just sound. At the very least, listen to the bells, once again returning to mindful awareness in the present moment, and may that mindfulness extend to the rest of your day or evening or wherever point you might be at the moment. So here we go. Countless beings we vow to free, ceaseless afflictions we vow to end, limitless truth doors we vow to open, the deepest paths of awakening we vow to realize. Thanks, everybody.